Welcome to the Strong, Single and Human podcast, a real look at single parenting, the ups and downs and how to navigate life with kids on your own while keeping sane. Covering subjects such as domestic violence through to fussy eaters and solo dating. I'm your host, Claire Martin. Welcome. Hi everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of my interview with Paul Dillon.
But, so I'm not trying to stop people from drinking alcohol. That's it's part of our life.
And you know what, like at the end of the day, right, there is some alcohol, some people, me being one of them, like with whiskey, it tastes nice, right? So it's a nice drink, as long as you're not having 12 or 15 shots of whiskey or whatever and getting paralytic and passing out or whatever. It's nice to have maybe 1 or 2, but it's like everything in life, like everything in moderation. Although I have to say, I'm getting to the age now where even 2 glasses of wine is killing me, and I'm sort of sitting there in the morning going, oh, why did I even drink at all? So I'm sort of getting to the advocate of I'm not going to drink because it's just so exhausting for me that, yeah.
And that, I think, is, you asked for changes. And I think one of the most interesting trends has been that we are seeing growing numbers of people who are choosing not to drink. And that is not just adult. It's not certainly school-based young people. We have kind of the highest. Well, to give you some sort of idea, back in 1999, 1 in 10 12 to 17-year-olds had never drunk alcohol. In 2017, the latest data that we have, because of COVID, kind of interrupted getting the 2020 data, but 2017, it was 1 in 3 12 to 17-year-olds who had never consumed alcohol. That's a huge cultural shift. And it's not just here. Europe has the same kind of thing. The States, Canada, everyone has seen an increase number of young people who have chosen not to drink. And with adults, things like Dry July and Feb Fast and all that stuff, which I'm not a great fan of, but certainly people actually can see the benefits of actually choosing not to drink.
Well, there's also... Yeah, and there's also online sites that are like the 100-day challenge or whatever. I don't know if it's called the 100-day challenge, but I know I've seen it advertised on places like Facebook and various different other things where people choose to go 100 days without alcohol, without an alcoholic drink. And then at the end of that, they go, well, actually, I've had such an awesome 100 days. I'm going to continue this on. And it goes for a year or it goes for whatever. And, look, at the end of the day, I know in my day, it's like, oh, let's get drunk and like have a good time. But actually, you don't need to get drunk to have a good time. It's all good. It's about the people you're with.
And I think it's really important. I certainly, sometimes I do an interview with a newspaper and I'm, there's a thing, Paul Dillon, anti-drug crusader. It sounds like I'm Superman with a cape or something. But, that's certainly not who I am at all. And people can choose, to be quite honest, I don't give a stuff what anybody does in their 20s. I don't care. I'm all about, school-based young people. That's who I care about because I think they're the most vulnerable in many ways. Now, you asked about changes. I think I've talked about alcohol with other drugs. Yeah. Look, I think the most incredibly important thing to remember about other drugs, and we'll talk about illegal drugs, I suppose, would be that they kind of come and go in cycles. So what we've seen over the years of me doing what I do is that we had a period of time where heroin was really hit Australia in a very big way. We had a very large number of people who died from heroin overdoses. I think it beat the number of people. It was a higher number than the people who died on the roads at one point. That came and then disappeared. And then we had the amphetamine cycle. If you're living in Melbourne, everyone was talking about the ice epidemic, and I hate the term epidemic, but that kind of popped up and then kind of has kind of dropped again. And then we went ecstasy, MDMA popped up, and certainly that's a drug that continues to be very popular in this country. And at the moment, I would have to say that most probably the drug of choice amongst, I suppose, those people who like to party in some way would certainly be cocaine. I've never seen so much of the drug in the country. And the huge amounts that are seized by police are just unbelievable.
Wow. So I'm really must be out of the scene then, because I would have never have said cocaine, but that's fair enough. Wow. Okay. Blimey. Okay. Well, fair enough. And then I'm sort of also thinking, like, I have to say, I read a really interesting article that you had on your, well, whether you call it article, but it was a blog post that you'd put on one of your blogs about the actual methods that are now changing around people actually getting their drugs, accessing drugs. I mean, that was such an eye-opener to us. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I was like, oh, damn, well, things really have changed.
I have to tell you, that was an eye-opener for me as well. I mean, I suppose the last 12 months, and I was very fortunate in term 1 and term 2. I was actually traveling around the country and meeting young people face-to-face again after having, last year kind of locked down, doing online. But, yes, for some people who are listening to this, they may remember me from Triple J. I used to have my own spot on Triple J for many years.
Yeah.
Back then, we used to have people calling in and talking about their drug use. I don't think we could do that radio show nowadays. I mean, the world has changed so much in terms of people being more conservative on what you can and can't say, and cancel culture and all that kind of stuff. But certainly it was really kind of a very open show about the issue. But I can remember when online purchasing drugs online first came into onto the scene, and I kept saying, I just can't believe that this would ever become a really big thing, mainly because most people who purchase illegal drugs would be kind of concerned that they might get caught. You would think, mailing them to your house would be an issue. Drugs have always come through, illegal drugs have always been purchased through friendship networks.
Yes.
You knew someone who possibly knew someone else who knew someone else. And, there weren't evil drug dealers standing at the end of the road,
It was a mate. It was a mate that could get something when you needed it, and that was it. Not that I know or anything, but yeah, no,
exactly.
Right.
And I think what has it makes perfect sense now is that friendship networks have changed. They've gone online, and that's exactly what we are seeing now.
Wow.
The use of social media apps, and I don't know if you've had people on who've talked about cyber safety, but certainly,
no, but I want to.
Yeah, I've gone to many, many, many talks where the person before me has been talking about cyber safety. And one of the key messages that any cyber safety person will say to you is monitor your child's social media, monitor your child's social media over and over again. Don't allow your child to get onto social media apps until, a certain age, etc. And, that's really bloody difficult. Mainly kids, as I've already said, they're really clever. And so they create false accounts, everything else for their parents to follow and all that stuff. But if you look at the research now, and certainly I was at a school where I was talking about ecstasy with this group of year 12s. It's when I talk about MDMA, ecstasy. And a young man came up to me and he said, do you want to see how easy it is to buy ecstasy MDMA? And I said, yeah, okay, show me. He's got his phone app. He got an app which I'd never seen before called Telegram. He went, now I timed this because I had an experience not long before with 3 young women showing me how easy it was to buy vapes, but and I didn't time it. This guy started on Telegram. He said, there's this list of people. He said, push one of those buttons. I pushed one of them. 9 photos came up of each containing ecstasy or MDMA caps and pills. He then said, pick one. I push one. And then within about 30 seconds, a little text message came up that said, hi, how many and where? He said, how many? I said, I don't know, 50. And a cost came up. He said the address, and I said the end of the school driveway. He typed it in. In 3.5 minutes, he had, if he'd have pushed the final button to say yes, we could have had them delivered to the gate at the thing at the end of the school day. It took 3.5 minutes. Now, that's terrifying.
Wow.
But what I always say to parents is on the flip side of that is, if you look at the research around illicit drug use in young people, school-based young people, I need to emphasize that, there's no evidence that drug use is spiraling out of control.
No.
Most young people aren't interested in using illicit drugs at that age. Certainly it jumps up when they leave school, but the access and availability of
frightening, isn't
illicit
it?
drugs, it's quite incredible. And it really has blown my mind. There are so many ways that if you want to find drugs, you will get them.
Yeah.
And of course, I think that's always been the case, but it's just the internet's just made it all faster. And that's kind of terrifying, particularly for parents, because we're always at least 3 or 4 steps behind our kids in understanding new technology.
Yeah. Yeah, no, look, I completely agree. And and there's so many things with the internet, and like it's opened up such a different world. There's our kids are being groomed, our kids are able to get drugs and various different other things from this internet world. But and also it's affecting their mental states, because they're seeing all of these social media, Instagram posts about people who are having such wonderful lives, but actually in reality we're only getting to see a snippet of their life, not the actual real behind the scenes stuff. So that causes a whole world of different problems. So I completely agree.
Unfortunately, we don't live our life through a filter. No. It would be really good if we did, because we'd all look fantastic.
I wouldn't look like this.
We'd be doing a podcast. We'd be doing videos.
Wow. Don't go there. So look, thank you for all of that, because that was an eye opener for me. It really was. But so let's go around. What are your views on legalizing some of these drugs now? Because there's a lot of people who are wanting to experiment with the psychedelics regarding PTSD, treatment of PTSD, and some other traumas and issues there. We're also looking at cannabis for treating Parkinson's and various different other illnesses as well. And I don't, my view is if it's going to help, then should we not be using these? But then, I don't know. What are your views on it?
Well, we're entering a very, very different, we're entering a very interesting time at the moment, because there are, as you have said, a number of previously regarded illegal, illicit drugs being used medicinally. I think we're talking about 2 different things here, though. I mean, first off, you're talking about the general legalization of drugs, and then you've got the medicalization of drugs. I mean, they're kind of 2 different things. Yes. My view on legalization, and it's just my own personal view, is that I think if as much as legalizing drugs could help in many, many ways. I mean, it removes the crime out of it, so you get a whole pile of young people who don't enter the criminal justice system and all that kind of stuff. I think the only issue that does occur when you're talking about legalizing it, no one is going to legalize drugs for everybody. There's always going to be a line. So, most people, there are only 2 countries in the world that have legalized cannabis, for example. Those 2 countries are Uruguay and Canada. People think lots of other places have. They haven't. They're the only 2.
No.
But, it's, I think Canada is, I'm not sure if it's 18 or 21, but there's an age cutoff. Now, what that instantly makes is a black market for those people under that age. So as much as legalization can help in one way, because the best part is all of a sudden you can talk about it in a much more honest way, it also creates some other issues. Now, Canada has done an incredibly good job here of putting lots of education in younger people about trying to delay use and stuff. So I can see the benefits of legalizing in that way, but it doesn't solve all the problems. We don't live in, a utopia where everything kind of works instantly as soon as you put one thing into place. It's not a silver bullet. So that's my view on that. I think decriminalising is really important, and lots of places around the world have decriminalised. And certainly in this country, to some extent, we have decriminalised cannabis, because if you get caught and you're young, there's caution systems. You don't go straight to court. But when it comes to the medicalisation, I suppose that's the right word, of drugs, look, I'm a supporter of medicinal cannabis if it helps one person, and you have to look at particularly those little, very young children with extreme forms of epilepsy, particularly Dravet syndrome. If it helps one of those kids, absolutely, totally support it.
Yeah.
I think the great problem that we face, and it's the same with psychedelics, there is lots of evidence to absolutely support that psychedelics can help with things like PTSD. Psilocybin, which is found in magic mushrooms, can assists with anxiety. It's a trial down in Melbourne.
Depression.
It's all those things.
Yeah, exactly.
If it helps anybody, that's great. But we have to get our messaging right here. And the trouble is with the medicinal use of cannabis is that, the government introduced it here. And there's a medicinal cannabis scheme that runs right across the country. Try to find some person who understands how that scheme works. And the only thing here, kids hear is cannabis is a medicine. And that is not actually the message that we should be giving. We should be because for some young people, and it's a small number, we believe it's about 1 in 10 people who use cannabis who will have a significant problem with it. But there is that issue with psychedelics. Absolutely, if psychedelics are used in a controlled setting with a counsellor guiding you through an experience, absolutely there are benefits. It doesn't mean you pop, a couple of mushrooms and go, to the local pub. That's completely different.
Yeah. No, and I have to completely agree with you. Look, there is a lot of evidence to say that psychedelics are helping people through PTSD and traumatic experiences, depression, anxiety, and stuff like that. But it is about the messaging, and my biggest concern is that we have got. I mean, there's films on people going down to Mexico or somewhere in South Australia, South America, ayahuasca, where they go to these ayahuasca retreats and they have these fantastic, amazing experiences, and they come out and they were suicidal going in, and they come out and they feel fantastic and like no suicidal thoughts. It's like a miracle cure. And I sort of sit there and go, exactly what you've said is like, well, okay, that's great, but that's within a controlled setting, which is managed, well, some of these aren't, but managed and monitored, and somebody is helping you through that process. To sit there with your mates and think you can get over your depression or anxiety by just, popping a few magic mushrooms or smashing up some, cactus, boiling it in a pot and then eating it, it's like, I just go, no. But
it is about the messaging, and it's hard. It's really difficult because there are, one of the most, and I've been very fortunate over the last, close to 30 years now of having some pretty incredible experiences. And I went to a conference in Arizona many years ago, and I was selected in a group of like 20, and I don't know why I was chosen, but I went to a sweat tent with some Navajo Native Americans and watched a peyote ceremony actually. And I think I was there for 36 hours, because there was a 12-hour preparation time for the people who went into it, then the actual experience, which we were privileged enough to see, which was quite phenomenal. And then what happened afterwards. It wasn't, and this is what I say to kids when they say, these drugs, mushrooms have been used for years, and DMT is another huge one at the moment, particularly amongst the really kind of the kids who are into psychedelics. But and you go, DMT was just not, they just didn't sit around and play video games while they were, there was a shaman who actually prepared them. They were put into a tent for sometimes days before and went through the experience. But that's very difficult messaging for teens because it's black and white. And as I said at the beginning, there's no black and white here. There's lots of shades of grey. And I was only talking to somebody not very long ago who is very into psychedelic research. And I said, I'm totally supportive of this. If it helps anyone, I went to a conference in Paris back in 1996, and one of the very first pieces of research looking at MDMA and how it could help PTSD with rape survivors. I think they had a sample size of 6 or something. It was a tiny study, one of the very first ones. And when you just heard what a difference it made in these young women's lives, it was phenomenal. And so I get all of that. But as I said to this guy, I said, you need to remember, I work with teenagers, school-based young people who hear that it can help in this way. We have to get the messaging right here. It's critical because you don't want really young people messing around with this when they don't know what they're doing. Now, are they likely to die? No, it's not about that. But there's a whole part of other stuff that can happen as a result, particularly if they have pre-existing conditions and they're messing around with stuff that could kind of mess them up a little bit more.
tipped them over the edge or whatever. And like, do you think with these sort of forms of therapy, for want of a better word, do you think so? Because for my view, if you go and Google psychedelic treatments for PTSD in Australia, say, there's not really that many places that actually would do that or are engaged in it. And me personally, I sort of think, well, I'm wondering if governments would get on board to actually bring more together regarding having this available to people in controlled environments, so that if people are searching for it, that they can actually use these sort of facilities to help.
Look, I was really, really surprised when the psilocybin trial was given the tick of approval from the government. That was a real surprise. Certainly people have been lobbying for a particular MDMA therapy for a number of years, and it's always been knocked back. I think, look, it's like anything. When you actually get something, when the ball starts rolling, and everyone's going to be looking at this trial in Melbourne and seeing what happens, and then you will see other things. The problem with this is it's like medicinal cannabis when it came on board. The reason medicinal cannabis really was kind of given a tick here after many, many years of no, was essentially a very concerted campaign by a group of people who used children as the reason in, and it was Dravet syndrome, particularly these little kids with horrible, they were having 100 seizures a day, awful, and they used those examples to really get people's sympathy behind it, and it occurred. And as I said, I'm totally supportive of it. Trouble is, as soon as these kind of things come up, you also get people who pop up who take advantage of the situation, and you get people who are offering, services and everything to very vulnerable people. And certainly I've been involved with a number of parents, one with a child with Dravet syndrome who was waiting to get onto a trial to use it with their child, and very sadly they got onto the trial. It had no effect at all. It didn't work for their child. It's sometimes these things are painted as silver bullets, that they'll fix everything. And psychedelic therapy, cannabis therapy, whatever, it's like any treatment. It's got to work for some people. It's not going to work for others. In that case, very sadly, their child died not long afterwards, which was awful. And they'd been waiting and waiting and waiting. And so I think we shouldn't be promising people things. I think we should. And we also don't want cowboys to come into the market and then, these centres popping up all over the place offering different treatments for different people. But then you'll have other people who go, well, you don't want that much red tape around it as well. We want to offer it to people. So, look, you can't win. It's a very, very difficult one.
Look, I think it needs to be regulated, but sometimes I get frustrated by for want of a better word, I know you've just used it, but red tape that means that it's a long time before governments actually come on board and basically start to allow research into these areas. And it's sort of frustrating that there's so much red tape to actually enable a research, or therapy for people that potentially it could really help.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And I mean, look, it's one of there are lots and lots of benefits of having that red tape in place that, we don't see things coming onto the market. And I mean, you only have to look at something like thalidomide from, all those years ago, all of a sudden, and that's certainly not going to happen with psychedelics or anything, but we just don't know. So that's why I think we do tend to get these times where people, as the red tape is there for a reason. You only have to look at what's currently happening around vaccines and everything else to see that, we're in the situation we are in because we did wait for so long before we actually agreed to take. So, look, there's no easy answer.
Okay, all right. So, look, just bringing this all back to kids and parents and stuff like that again, what are your final, 3 tips for parents who are concerned about their children regarding alcohol and drug use as such? What do you say they should be really just watching out, educating their teens?
Number one, I think when you're talking about alcohol and other drugs, I think it's about, you could look specifically at what do you say about alcohol and other drugs and all that sort of stuff. But really, I think this is about just general parenting and, caring about your kids. I think number one, very importantly, is making sure you keep telling them how great they are. It's really important. We live in a world, if you think about so much that's in the media, so much about kids, it's about how bad they are and how they're so much worse than they used to be and so much stuff. And I think certainly in a time of, COVID and, I just got the saddest photo from a group of young people whose year 11 formal was meant to be last Saturday. And of course, restrictions. No. So they had an online formal where they sent me a photograph of all themselves on a Zoom thing. And you look at all that. I think we keep having to say to our kids how great they are. They need to know how great they are. Find every opportunity you can. I think the second thing is about finding a way of keeping connected. And that's about finding, I think sometimes parents get obsessed with this idea of connection must mean that it's a long time. It doesn't have to be a long time. It has to be quality time. I live in Surrey Hills in Sydney, and I don't know if anybody's been to Surrey Hills in Sydney, but there's lots of cafes usually. And you walk around cafes on the weekend and you see these quite often. It's a dad quite often it's dads with daughters, I have to say. And they're sitting there and they're at the cafe and both of them on their phones.
Yeah.
And you kind of look at that and you think this is such an opportunity to have such a wonderful experience, and you're kind of blowing it. This does not have to be hours. If you just spend 3 minutes talking to your child as you drop them off at school, a car is a great place to have a quality conversation with your teens. Why? Because they don't have to look at you and they can't escape. But it's a great opportunity to have that, have that time. So finding that one thing that you do with your child each week, thing, in primary school, it's really kind of easy to do it.
Look, it is because you can sit there and colour and do
exactly
do whatever. So, and they're quite amicable with that. But I'm sure getting older is going to be a little bit. And it's
finding that special thing to do that only you two do. That's a really kind of key thing. And as I said, don't make it like an hour or 2 hours. Don't make it cumbersome. But it's that walking dog or just having that one. Try to do that, and it will change as you go into high school. But the final one, and I suppose this is, a bit more specifically alcohol or drugs in some way, is the key to keeping your child safe in any area is to know where they are, know who they're with, and know when they'll be home.
Yeah.
If you can do that, and the trouble is they will get to an age where just asking them, you're not necessarily going to get an honest answer. But that's when you have to do a little bit of digging, and then your child will inevitably let you down and lie to you. That doesn't mean they're a bad kid, doesn't mean you're a bad parent. If you can actually keep that kind of monitoring, we know that everything changes usually around year 9. Year 9 is 14 is a horrible age for young women, and 15 it is for young men. Absolutely, year 10's a nightmare.
Bear those in mind then.
But around that time, if you can keep monitoring your child, it has to be age appropriate. I mean, that's really important, but if you can keep monitoring, then that is a way of keeping them safe. And that's all any parent wants, is to have their child come home to them safe. And if you do those, I think those 3 things, it can help a little bit.
Well, I think, look, I agree with you with everything you've said. I think it's actually about also recognizing that your child is their own person.
Yeah.
They're not like who you want them to be. Like, they are their own person. They have their own thoughts, their own feelings, their own views on things. And I suppose at 14, 15, they're developing and, creating their own them as such.
Yeah.
And moving away from you. So they're growing away from you to hopefully by the time they're 25 grow back and come back to you. But you need to give them that space to be able to find out who they are.
It's
what they
so
like,
fascinating when you look at research in the area of around the age of 13, 14, 15, what your child is starting to do at that age. And it is younger for young women without any doubt, is they're trying to establish their own identity, that you are their world in primary school. You might not think they necessarily are, but you are their world. Your influence, everything you do is influencing them in such a big way. But when they hit that, early adolescence, they're trying to establish their own identity, often completely different to you. It's incredibly important that it's different to you. That's why we see kids wanting to get things like tattoos and piercings in strange places. And often parents say to me, well, how can I stop my child from, getting a tattoo? I go, get one yourself. If you get a nose ring, your child will not want one.
Happy days. This is good. Good advice.
They want to establish their own identity, and their peers become more of an influence. Now, I think what some parents do is they kind of throw their arms up in the air and they go, well, I don't have any influence at all. And the research says that is just so not true. You will always have you will always be an influence. It's just that you change from, as I said right at the very beginning, a managing role to a consulting role. And if you can navigate through that really difficult time of 13, 14, 15, then the future years are going to be a lot easier.
Yeah. It's instilling those values and behaviours at a young age.
Absolutely.
And hoping that they remember those when they're in those other ages, to then, when they come back to you at 25, go, hey, wow, it's all good. I completely agree with you. I used to be really annoyed with my parents when I was 15, 16, 17, because they wouldn't let me go to clubs. They wouldn't let me do X, Y, and Z, all the stuff that, a 15, 16, 17-year-old would want to do way back in the UK in the 1980s. Should I say that? But now, sitting here at the age I am, I sit there and go, no, hats off to them for actually, tying me down and giving a toss and going, no, we don't want our daughter to be like that. You're not gonna do X, Y, and Z. So
look, I get so many parents who contact me who say, I had a horrible time. I followed all your advice, Paul. I did all of this stuff that you suggested when I saw you give talks 25 years ago. And my son or daughter hated me. Yeah. They've come back to me in their early 20s, sometimes in their early 20s, and they've said, you know what, you were the only parent who cared enough to put the boundaries around me. They're going to fight them. Absolutely. That's what they're there for.
Exactly right.
Boundaries are there for the kids to push against. They need that. If they don't have it, they wander through life aimlessly.
Yeah, no, I agree. Look, thank you. Thank you so much for today. It's been really interesting talking to you. I love talking to you. It's brilliant. I have one final question to ask you.
Oh, okay.
All right. One final question. I ask it to all my guests, so I'll be interested to hear your answer. If you had a superpower, what would it be?
I think there's kind of two.
Ooh,
I don't know. It depends on my mood. Yeah. Because I always used to have the dream of, the flying dream that people have.
Oh, yeah.
And for me, flying was always like totally euphoric in a dream. I thought it was just the most phenomenal feeling. And I did the parachuting. I didn't actually parachute. I did the indoor parachuting thing. I don't know if you've seen that. Yeah. And that was one of the most amazing experiences, because it's like flying. It's not like you're falling, which is parachuting, you're falling.
You're not actually flying. Yeah.
And so that was it. It's always been my kind of, because that's a euphoric feeling that you get when you dream. But the other one is invisibility.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I just really kind of love to watch and I don't know if that does make me a bit of a voyeur.
Yeah, it does. It did.
The only reason it would be is because I could go to places and people wouldn't
know you were there.
Yeah,
and you'd get a different view of, because they would be, they wouldn't be aware of you being around. You would then see what would actually happen when you weren't around as such.
But I'm obsessed with superpowers. Since a kid, I've always been absolutely insane about superheroes and stuff. So something I'm sure some of your guests will often wonder have a kind of a question, don't know how to answer that. No, completely. There are some people who really don't know how to answer it, and then but I've had all different answers. Some people have wanted to delve into people's minds. Some people have wanted to go back in time. Some people have just wanted a transporter to be able to hop from one country to the other and not actually have to get on a plane and stuff, which I suppose is handy. I'd like all of those.
Yeah,
really.
no, I know.
I'd like all of those.
I know. I know I've only said a superpower, but I know what you mean. Several would be nice, but yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah. No, that's cool. Look, thank you once again for for spending the time with us. I know you're really, really busy. You're, doing lots of different podcast interviews. You're here, there, and everywhere. It's really great. But look, thank you for spending the time and coming and talking to us. It's been brilliant.
Not a problem, Claire. It's been my pleasure.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. See ya.
Hey, everyone. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please hit subscribe wherever you like to hear podcasts. If you'd like to support us further, share this episode with your friends and family on all the usual social media platforms that you're normally on. And finally, drop us a review on iTunes, as I'd love to hear your thoughts, comments, and ideas. It all helps me to understand and produce awesome content that I know you're going to want to hear, like this. If you want to check out past episodes, write to us, appear on the podcast, or for links, resources, and show notes, go to our website, www.strongsingleandhuman.com. We are also on all the usual social media platforms, Insta, Facey, and Twitter. Have a wonderful week, and I hope to see you back here again soon. Be kind to yourself, and remember, no one's perfect, and we're all just putting one foot in front of the other and doing our best. I'm Claire Martin, and you've been listening to the Strong, Single, and Human podcast.